You black girl! Kitchen's that way!
Whitney Dawson hadn't even closed the door.
I'm here for...
Grab a pitcher and start pouring, now!
They keep wandering in like strays, just ignore her.
Whitney walked to the far end of the table, pulled out a chair and sat down.
Who told you to put your black ass on that seat? Get up. Now.
Whitney looked him dead in the eyes.
You're going to regret that.
The Sterlings were broke. This dinner was their last shot, a $600 million deal with Apex Meridian Capital. The fund's CEO was supposed to walk through that door any minute, but from the moment they hurled that first insult at the quiet black woman, their empire was already beyond saving. 2 hours earlier, Howard Sterling had stood at the head of that same table, adjusting a cufflink that cost more than most people's cars. 71 years old, silver hair combed straight back. The patriarch of Sterling Industries, oil, gas, real estate, a shipping lane in the Gulf, and for the first time in his life, desperate. "Listen to me," he said. His voice was the kind that had fired entire boardrooms without blinking. Apex Meridian Capital is sending a representative tonight. $600 million. That is what is on this table. Do not, I repeat, do not ruin this. Colleen arranged orchids that didn't need arranging. She understood. The Sterling Group was hemorrhaging. 3 failed developments in Nevada. Stock price in freefall. Creditors circling like patient vultures. This deal wasn't an opportunity. It was oxygen. Grant leaned against the doorframe, scrolling his phone. 32. Harvard MBA he barely earned. A corner office he definitely didn't deserve. Relax, Dad. Fun guys are all the same. Flash the projections, pour the good wine, let me talk. I'll close it by dessert. Howard stared at his son. You will smile. You will listen. You will not speak unless I tell you to. Crystal. Howard had imagined the Apex Meridian representative 100 times. Gray suit, firm handshake, maybe a Stanford ring. Someone who spoke his language, the language of old money, golf courses, and boardrooms that smelled like mahogany. Someone who looked like him. He never imagined Whitney Dawson. 37 miles south that same afternoon, Whitney had pulled the navy dress from her closet. Simple cut, no label showing, no diamonds, no heels. She picked up a leather portfolio from her desk, edges worn soft from years of use, initials barely visible. W.D. Her phone buzzed. A text from her CFO, Roland Hayes. Sterling financials are worse than we thought. Debt to equity at 4.3. They're hiding a Nevada land position that's underwater by $200 million. You sure about going in person? That's exactly why I'm going in person. She drove herself. A 6-year-old Honda Accord, dark gray. The kind of car that disappears in a parking lot. The kind nobody looks twice at when it pulls up to a billionaire's estate. Whitney Dawson was the founder and CEO of Apex Meridian Capital. $14 billion under management. Clean energy infrastructure across 3 continents. Forbes had profiled her twice. The Wall Street Journal once called her the quietest force in American finance. Her net worth sat north of $2 billion. None of that was visible tonight. She had learned something early. A rule that never failed. The way people treat you when they think you're nobody tells you everything about who they really are. The Sterlings thought they were interviewing her tonight. They were wrong. She was interviewing them, and so far they were failing. The Honda turned onto the gravel drive. The estate glowed golden against the October dark. Inside, Howard Sterling checked his watch for the 5th time. The representative was late. No, she was already there. Sitting at the far end of his table, in the seat meant for the help, and nobody had a clue. The table settled into an awkward hum after Whitney sat down. Howard cleared his throat and forced the room back to business. He still had a deal to save, whoever this woman claimed to be. We're expecting someone from Apex Meridian, Howard said, directing his voice at Whitney for the first time. He spoke slowly, like explaining directions to a lost tourist. A senior representative. Are you with their team? An assistant, perhaps? I am the representative. Howard blinked. Colleen covered her mouth with her napkin. Grant let out a short, ugly laugh. You're joking, Grant said. Dad, she's joking. Whitney opened the leather portfolio, slid a business card across the table. Cream-colored, embossed, simple. Whitney Dawson, founder and CEO, Apex Meridian Capital. Howard picked it up, turned it over, looked at Whitney, looked at the card again. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, doubt, and something close to nausea. There must be some kind of mistake, Colleen said. Her smile was still locked in place, but the warmth had drained out of it completely. We were told the CEO would attend personally. You were told correctly, Mrs. Sterling. Silence, the kind that presses against your ears. Grant broke it first. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and tilted his chin upward. The universal pose of a man who'd rather choke than admit he was wrong. Okay, fine, so they made you CEO. He rolled his eyes. Diversity quota. We all know how that works. They needed a face for the brochure and you checked the right boxes. Congratulations. A woman at the far end of the table, one of the guests, wife of some banking partner, shifted in her seat. She looked at her plate, said nothing. Whitney placed her hands flat on the table. Mr. Sterling, would you like to continue or should I wait until you're finished? Grant smirked. Oh, I'm just getting started, sweetheart. Howard cut in, not to defend Whitney, but to protect the deal. That's enough, Grant. He turned to Whitney with a smile so forced it looked painful. Ms. Dawson, forgive my son. He has a sense of humor. Please, let's talk business. But the damage was already spreading. Whitney could see it in the micro-expressions around the table. The way the guests avoided her eyes. The way Colleen's fingers tightened around her wine glass. The way Howard kept glancing at the business card like it might change if he stared long enough. They didn't believe her. Even with the card in hand, even with her name and title printed in black ink, they couldn't make it fit. A black woman, CEO, $14 billion. It didn't match the picture in their heads, and they would rather break reality than update the picture. Howard launched into his pitch. He stood, clicked a remote, and a projector illuminated the far wall with Sterling Group's logo and a slide titled Strategic Partnership Proposal, Confidential. He spoke for 12 minutes straight. Revenue projections climbing at 18%, market share graphs with arrows pointing skyward, glossy renderings of a Nevada solar farm that existed only in PowerPoint. Whitney listened without interrupting. She didn't take notes, didn't nod, didn't react to a single slide. When Howard finished, he tugged his cuffs and smiled, the smile of a man who believed his own charts. So, what do you think? Whitney tilted her head slightly. Your slide on page 7 shows a revenue projection based on full federal permits for the Nevada site. That's correct. You don't have those permits. Howard's smile flickered. They're in process. They were denied 4 months ago, Mr. Sterling. Your legal team appealed. The appeal was rejected last Tuesday. The room temperature dropped. Grant's smirk disappeared. Colleen set down her wine glass with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. How do you know that? Howard's voice had changed, quieter, careful. Whitney didn't answer the question. She flipped a page in her portfolio and continued. Your debt-to-equity ratio is 4.3. You have 3 developments stalled in litigation. Your stock has lost 31% in the last quarter, and your largest institutional investor filed to reduce their position 2 weeks ago. She looked up. I know your numbers better than you do, Mr. Sterling. The question isn't whether I'm qualified to sit at this table. The question is whether you are. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Grant opened his mouth, then closed it. Howard Sterling, a man who had built an empire on the belief that he was the smartest person in any room, sat back down in his chair. Slowly, like the air had been let out of him. And the dinner was just getting started. Dinner was served at 8:15. Roasted lamb with rosemary crust, truffle risotto, a salad that probably cost more per leaf than most people's lunch. The staff moved silently, pouring, placing, disappearing, like ghosts trained to be invisible. Whitney was seated between two empty chairs. Nobody had moved to sit beside her. The 14 guests clustered around Howard and Colleen at the center of the table like planets orbiting their sun. Whitney sat at the edge of the solar system, alone. She didn't mind. Alone was useful. Alone meant she could watch. Howard tried to recover from Whitney's financial dismantling by steering the conversation to safer ground. He talked about the Sterling family legacy, 3 generations of industry, philanthropy, a hospital wing with their name on it. "My grandfather built this company with nothing," Howard said, carving the lamb with theatrical precision. "Nothing but grit and vision. That's what this family represents. Grit." Whitney noted that his grandfather had also built the company with a significant amount of segregated labor contracts, but she kept that to herself. Grant, meanwhile, had found his second wind. 2 glasses of Bordeaux had brought his smirk back. He leaned across the table toward Whitney, elbows planted in a way that Colleen would normally scold him for. "So, Whitney, can I call you Whitney? Tell me something." He swirled his wine. "Where did you go to school? Community college? Some kind of program?" "Wharton, then Columbia for my MBA." Grant's swirl slowed. "Huh, Wharton." He said it the way someone says the name of a restaurant they don't believe you could afford. "Well, they let anyone in these days." A guest to his left, a man named Phil Archer, investment banker, old friend of Howard's, laughed into his napkin. Colleen smiled her glass-cutting smile. Whitney took a bite of lamb, chewed slowly, said nothing. The evening continued. Howard presented more slides, market analyses, partnership synergies, a 5-year roadmap that depended entirely on money he didn't have. He narrated each slide like a professor lecturing a freshman class, pausing after every point to check if Whitney was following along. "This is our projected IRR," he said, tapping the screen. "Internal rate of return. Do you know what that means?" "I do. Of course. Just making sure we're on the same page." He smiled. The smile of a man explaining a lawnmower to someone he assumed had never seen grass. Whitney let it pass. She let all of it pass. Every condescending pause, every over-explained acronym, every glance between Howard and Colleen that said, "Can you believe we have to do this?" Then Colleen made her move. It happened during the main course. The water pitcher near Whitney's end of the table was empty. Colleen noticed, not because she was thirsty, but because she saw an opportunity. "Whitney, dear," Colleen's voice was honey poured over broken glass. "Since you're right there by the kitchen, would you mind terribly refilling the pitcher? The staff seems to have disappeared." The table went still, not shocked, expectant, like they'd been waiting for someone to say it. Whitney looked at the empty pitcher, looked at Colleen, looked at the 14 faces watching her. She stood up, picked up the pitcher, walked to the kitchen, filled it with ice water, came back, walked around the table, slowly, deliberately, and filled every single glass. Howard's, Colleen's, Grant's, Phil Archer's, every last one. She set the pitcher down, returned to her seat, folded her napkin across her lap. "Anything else?" Whitney asked. Her voice was perfectly level. Grant grinned. "See, Dad? She's a natural." Colleen patted Whitney's arm as she sat. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's very kind." Under the table, Whitney's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen below the tablecloth. Roland Hayes. "They have no idea, do they?" Whitney typed back with one thumb. "Not yet, but they're giving me everything I need." She put the phone away and returned her attention to the table. Howard was back at his slides, talking about a strategic land acquisition in Nevada. 200,000 acres of desert he planned to convert into the largest solar farm on the eastern seaboard. "The permits are locked in," he said confidently. "We're just waiting on final approval." Whitney knew 3 things Howard didn't. First, those permits had been denied. Twice. Second, the Environmental Review Board that controlled the approval process had an advisory committee. Third, Whitney sat on that committee. She filed it away, like everything else tonight. Filed and catalogued and stored with surgical precision. On the wall behind Howard, a framed photograph caught her eye. The Sterling family shaking hands with a United States senator. Big smiles. Campaign fundraiser, probably. The senator's name was on a rezoning petition Whitney had been asked to review last month. She hadn't made up her mind on that petition yet. Until now. The lamb grew cold. The wine kept flowing. The insults kept coming. Smaller now, subtler, the kind that hide inside compliments. You speak so well. Your people must be so proud. It's refreshing to see someone like you in this world. Whitney absorbed every word, recorded every slight. The Sterlings were performing their own autopsy and didn't even know it. By 9:30, the dinner plates were cleared. Howard suggested they move to his study for the real conversation. Whitney stood, smoothed her dress, and followed them down the hallway, her leather portfolio tucked under her arm, her expression unchanged. She had learned everything she came to learn. Now it was time to use it. Howard's study smelled like old leather and ambition. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, first editions nobody had read, bought by the yard to fill the space. A mahogany desk the size of a small country. Oil paintings of Sterling men going back 3 generations, each one staring down at whoever entered like they owned them. Howard settled into his chair behind the desk. Colleen perched on the arm of a couch. Grant sprawled across a wingback chair with his 3rd glass of Bordeaux, legs crossed, one loafer bouncing. Phil Archer and 2 other guests followed. The inner circle, the trusted few who were supposed to witness the closing of the century. Whitney took the chair nobody offered her, a straight-backed wooden seat near the door, the kind of chair you give someone you expect to leave soon. She set her portfolio on her lap, unopened, waited. Howard launched into phase 2 of his pitch, the real numbers, the confidential projections. He pulled out a bound presentation, leather cover, gold embossing, Sterling Group, Strategic Vision 2025 to 2030, and slid it across the desk toward Whitney. This is the full picture, he said. Everything Apex Meridian needs to see. Growth trajectory, asset valuation, partnership structure. I think you'll find our position is stronger than the market suggests. Whitney opened the presentation, turned pages slowly. Her face revealed nothing. Not interest, not boredom, not the fact that she had already seen every number in this document 3 weeks ago and found 17 errors. She stopped on page 12. A chart showing the Sterling Group's subsidiary structure, a web of holding companies, LLCs, and offshore entities that looked like a plate of spaghetti drawn by a drunk accountant. Mr. Sterling, she said, tell me about Cascade Holdings. Howard's pen stopped moving. What about it? Cascade Holdings is a subsidiary registered in Delaware. It doesn't appear in your public filings, but it holds the deed to 47,000 acres in northern Nevada. The room changed. Not the temperature, the pressure. Like the altitude had shifted and nobody's ears had popped yet. That's an internal matter, Howard said, not relevant to this discussion. It's relevant if those 47,000 acres are the collateral for the $200 million loan you took from Pacific Western Bank last March, a loan that's currently in technical default because the land appraisal came in 60% below what you reported. Grant's loafer stopped bouncing. Phil Archer leaned forward and whispered something to Howard. Howard waved him off. I don't know where you're getting your information, Howard said, but I assure you, I'm getting it from your own filings, Mr. Sterling. The ones you submitted to the SEC, cross-referenced with the county assessor's records in Washoe County, Nevada. It took my team about 4 hours. Whitney turned another page in his presentation, calmly, like she was browsing a magazine at a dentist's office. Your slide on page 14 projects an 18% annual return based on full operational capacity of the Nevada Solar Project. But the environmental impact study was rejected by the Federal Review Board in February. Your appeal was denied. The project is frozen. Howard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should wait for your senior partner to discuss these details. Whitney looked at him for a long moment. There is no senior partner coming, Mr. Sterling. She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a folder. Not the glossy gold embossed kind. A plain manila folder, thick with papers, edges bent from use. She opened it on the desk. Inside, annotated financials covered in red ink, margin notes in tight, precise handwriting, post-it tabs color-coded by risk category, a complete forensic analysis of the Sterling Group's actual financial position. 3 months of work, laid out in silence on Howard Sterling's mahogany desk. Howard stared at the folder, at the red ink, at the post-it tabs. He was looking at his own empire through someone else's eyes, and for the first time, he could see the cracks. "Ms. Dawson," he said. His voice had dropped half an octave. "I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot tonight." Grant tried to recover. He sat up, uncrossed his legs, attempted the kind of charming smile that had gotten him through Harvard on half-effort. "Look, Whitney, I think what my father is trying to say is—" "Mr. Sterling!" Whitney's voice was quiet, but it filled the room the way a blade fills a wound. "Your existing debt covenant with Pacific Western contains a cross-default clause. If the Nevada land position is revalued, and it will be, every loan in your portfolio triggers